The lights were blinding. The crowd was screaming. The cameras were live across America. But no one, not even Jimmy Kimmel himself, knew that in the next few minutes, the laughter would die, and silence would take over. It wasn't just another interview. It was a confrontation. It was truth versus ego. And when Tyrus looked Jimmy in the eyes on live TV, the world saw something they had never seen before. A man famous for making others laugh, finally breaking down himself. Because that night, Jimmy Kimmel didn't face a guest. He faced himself. The lights of the studio gleamed brighter than ever. Audience packed. Cameras zoomed in. The world waited for another night of laughter with America's favorite late-night comedian, Jimmy Kimmel. He walked on stage with his signature grin, waving to the cheering crowd. Everything looked perfect, but what Jimmy didn't know was that tonight's guest would change his life forever. Tyrus, the wrestler turned commentator, was already backstage, calm as a storm before the thunder. The producers briefed him. "Keep it light, Tyrus. Jimmy loves jokes." Tyrus just nodded, but inside, he'd made up his mind. Tonight, he wasn't here for jokes. He was here for truth. The show began with laughter. Jimmy cracked a few jokes about politicians, poked fun at celebrity scandals, the audience roared. Everything was routine, until Jimmy said, "And now, my guest tonight, give it up for Tyrus." The giant walked in. The crowd cheered. Jimmy shook his hand and grinned. "Good to see you, Tyrus. You look like you could break me in half." The audience laughed again, but Tyrus didn't. He smiled faintly, looked around, and said quietly, "I'm not here to break anyone, Jimmy. I'm here to ask you something." Jimmy raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what's that?" The studio grew quieter. Tyrus leaned in. "Do you ever get tired of pretending to care about the people you joke about?" The crowd went still. The laughter stopped instantly, replaced by uneasy murmurs. Even Jimmy blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "What do you mean?" he asked with a forced smile. Tyrus didn't look away. "You've built your career on making people laugh. But sometimes, Jimmy, laughter hurts. You joke about people who can't defend themselves. You turn pain into punchlines. Don't you ever feel guilty?" The audience gasped. Jimmy shifted in his seat, the smile fading from his face. "Tyrus," he said slowly, "this is a comedy show." Tyrus nodded. "Yeah, but comedy and cruelty aren't the same thing." The room felt heavier. Cameras kept rolling. The director gestured to cut to commercial, but Jimmy shook his head slightly. Something deep inside him wanted to know where this was going. Tyrus continued, his tone calm but firm. "When I was younger, people used to laugh at me, too. I was big, clumsy, angry. They thought it was funny. But every laugh cut deeper. I told myself, someday I'll be the one who talks, not the one who gets laughed at. And now, here I am, looking at a man who made it to the top doing the same thing that once broke me." The audience didn't move. Even the crew stopped whispering. Jimmy tried to hold his composure. "So, you think I'm the bad guy here?" Tyrus shook his head. "No, I think you're a good man who forgot what good means." That line hit Jimmy like a punch to the chest. He looked down at his hands, suddenly unsure of himself. For years, he'd convinced himself that laughter healed, that it made the world better. But now, under those bright studio lights, it felt hollow. He thought about the sketches that mocked people's accents, the political jokes that went too far, the tearful call from a celebrity who'd begged him to stop using her personal life as material. He remembered laughing it off. "Come on, it's just a joke." But maybe it wasn't. Minutes passed in silence. Then Jimmy spoke, voice trembling slightly. "You know, I've spent so many years behind this desk. Every night, millions of people watch me laugh. But when the cameras go off, I go home, and sometimes, I feel nothing." The crowd listened, stunned. He went on, "I tell myself it's just comedy. But when you said that, Tyrus, it hit me. Maybe I've been running from guilt for a long time." Tyrus leaned forward. "Then stop running." Jimmy looked up. "How?" "Start by being honest," Tyrus said. "Say what you're afraid to say." Jimmy's throat tightened. His hands trembled slightly as he stood up. He turned toward the cameras. "Don't cut. Don't edit this." The director panicked. "Jimmy, leave it," Jimmy shouted. "Let people hear this." He faced the audience and took a deep breath. For years, I've made jokes about people I don't even know. I've mocked their looks, their beliefs, their pain. And every time someone cried or got angry, I told myself, they don't get the joke. But maybe I'm the one who didn't get it. His voice cracked. Maybe I've been the punchline all along. The audience sat in silence. Some people wiped their eyes. Even Tyrus looked moved. Jimmy continued, softer now. We live in a world where it's easier to mock than to understand. I don't want to be part of that anymore. Tyrus stood up slowly. Then don't be. Jimmy looked at him, eyes red. You came here to confront me, and you did. You could have embarrassed me, but instead, you gave me something I haven't felt in a long time. What's that? Tyrus asked. Truth. The next day, every news outlet exploded with headlines. Jimmy Kimmel breaks down on live TV. Tyrus exposes the dark side of comedy. Raw, real, unscripted moment shakes Hollywood. Clips went viral. Millions of people debated what happened. Some called it staged, others called it bravery. But deep down, everyone felt it, the rare honesty that television had forgotten. 3 nights later, Jimmy returned to his show. The lights were dim. The music was gone. He walked onto the stage in silence and faced the camera. I owe a lot of people an apology, he began. Not because of what Tyrus said, but because he was right. I've used humor as a shield. But it's time I use it to heal instead. He paused, tears welling up. If I've ever hurt you with my words, I'm sorry. The studio erupted in applause. Not the usual laughter, but something deeper, warmer. Even the crew clapped through tears. Jimmy smiled faintly. This show will still make you laugh, but never again at the cost of someone's dignity. That's my promise. Weeks passed. Ratings soared. Not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. People said the show felt human again. Guests opened up more. Jokes carried meaning, not malice. One evening, Jimmy invited Tyrus back. When he walked on stage, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Jimmy shook his hand and said, "You know, you wrecked me that night." Tyrus laughed. "You wrecked yourself. I just turned on the mirror." Jimmy grinned. "Well, I needed it." Tyrus replied, "We all do, brother. Sometimes the hardest fight isn't with others, it's with the part of us that refuses to listen." Jimmy nodded. "Thank you for making me listen." That night ended not with jokes, but with silence, and a hug that said more than words ever could. Months later, during a special monologue, Jimmy looked into the camera and said, "I used to think success was about being the loudest voice in the room. Now I know it's about being the truest one. Tyrus taught me that courage isn't shouting back, it's owning your mistakes." He paused, smiling softly. So tonight, if you're watching this and you've ever hidden behind humor, anger, or pride, stop running. Someone out there is waiting for the real you. The audience stood, clapping. Some cried. Millions watching at home felt goosebumps. Because at that moment, late-night TV didn't feel like TV anymore, it felt like redemption. Sometimes, it takes one honest voice to shake a world built on laughter. Sometimes, the biggest explosions don't destroy, they rebuild. Jimmy Kimmel didn't just explode that night. He awoke. And maybe, that's the message for all of us. Sparkles when someone confronts you with truth, don't fear it. Embrace it. Because that's where real change begins. Collision end screen line for video outro. Right finger don't run from the truth, let it set you free. Speech balloon drop your thoughts in the comments if this story touched your heart. Bell subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this one.